And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, Season 2, Episode number 16. Today's episode is, in my opinion, one of the best episodes that I have ever recorded, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. Today, I'm chatting with Gunawan, someone who's not just an incredible wedding photographer, but also a true creative force in the industry. G's career spans over 20 years, starting shooting his very first wedding back in 2005. And since then, he's really done it all, capturing unforgettable moments, teaching astrophotography as well, and also collaborating with Nikon Australia. Yes, you heard that right. G is supported by Nikon Australia, and we dive into that story of how that happened in this episode. G's story is so much more than that, though. It's more than photography. It started with him growing up in Indonesia, immigrating into Australia. It's packed with resilience, gratitude, and just a drive to make the world a better place. And you'll hear that through the way that G speaks about his art and the world generally. In this episode, we're talking about everything, about how G started in photography, shooting his first wedding on a film camera, which to me sounds scarily crazy, like thinking about that and how much goes into that. Also, how he's now teaching workshops in other things like astrophotography as well, I think is crazy. And he just has a drive for creative work and how he can try new creative things. And you'll hear about how he brings up all those different experiences throughout his life and the things that have helped shaped him and his drive to really want to help other people and the next generation of artists, which I think is honestly incredible. So if you're looking for a dose of inspiration, maybe just that motivation or something to help you chase those scary big dreams, this episode is definitely for you. And G spills so much motivation in this episode. He comes at it with his own true story, and I'm very thankful that G came on here and spoke so openly about his own personal story. And I think that that is so helpful for so many people to hear what G's gone through, but also just his outlook on life and his wanting to help as many people as possible. So I hope that this episode is able to be super inspirational for you. But before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to give someone a special shout out. As you guys may have realized, I have an editor for this podcast who I do mention at the end of every episode if you guys do stick around until then. I'm super fortunate because for me, having an editor has allowed me to focus on preparing for the interviews and getting really good guests on and talking to people without having to worry about whether an episode is going to come out next week. It's always just there, ready to go. And my editor makes me sound incredible for you guys to listen to. And this week is a very special one because it's actually my editor's birthday. So if you guys are watching over on YouTube, please go and wish Jade from Mossy Heart Media a massive happy birthday or send her a message on Instagram. Details are linked in every description of every episode, so go and make sure you do that. I'm sure she would hate me saying this, and if you're hearing this, that means that it's still in the episode, and she didn't cut it out, but Jade does an incredible job editing every single episode, makes me sound really well put together and really professional in these episodes, as well as my guests have given me really good feedback as well. I know that for me, it sounds like a bit of a ramble during the conversation, but the final episode that you guys are hearing is always really well done, and I'm really appreciative for Jade. So go and give her a thank you and give her a happy birthday for all her hard work. And I want to wish Jade a massive birthday week. Thank you this week and a happy birthday. And I hope that you are able to take a bit of time off from editing this podcast because you do an incredible job. But with all of that out of the way, let's jump into this episode with Gunawan. He has a massive story of triumph, of resilience, and you guys are going to get a lot of motivation out of it. I hope you're as pumped up after listening to this episode as I was having it. Hey, Mike. Well, hello, G. Thank you for coming on the episode today. Really excited to be able to get you on the podcast. You're an incredible photographer and someone that's done so much, I think, in the industry, has tried out so many different things and is an amazing photographer, if I do say so myself. And, honored to be able to be friends with you and have spoken with you on many different occasions. And I also want to say that you're so much more than a photographer. I was speaking to my wife before I jumped onto this episode and she was like, are you over having photographers on the podcast? Because this isn't a photography podcast, and I've emphasized that a lot of times. But I like to speak to creative people, but I think with you, you're like so much more of a creative person. There's so much more to you than just a photographer. And hopefully through this episode, we'll dive into that. But thanks for coming on the show. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell people what it is that you do day to day?
Yeah, thanks, man. First of all, I'm so grateful to be here. So thanks for having me. My name is G. My name is Gunawan, but people call me G. I just shortened my name because I used to work in a call center. We're gonna deep dive into that a bit. And when I say, hey, my name is G, how can I help? They always go like, oh, what's your name again, right? and that increases my talk time. That's part of the KPI. So I was just like, call me G. So that's my name. I am a wedding photographer, and I also do workshops like astrophotography and share my knowledge about what I know, because I believe that people that know the most are people who actually share and teach.
You do learn so much through actually sharing what you know, don't you?
Yeah, 100%, man.
I think I've learned more by helping other people than I've learned off just like consuming things. I learn more by actually showing people how to do it. And you very quickly learn what you don't know.
Exactly. Plus, you're going to get questions from all those critical thinking people, or even from the trolls. You learn a lot from them. They're going to challenge you. You're going to go like, what is that? And it opens up a new world when you did a search on that.
Definitely good to be challenged, though. I think sometimes we can get stuck in our own box of the way we do things, and having those questions or those sort of critiques from other people help you to grow and help you to know how you could possibly improve.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Well, let's jump into what you just brought up about introducing yourself and your like a name and shortening it to G. Let's go back to that because I thought that was interesting. I wanted to dive in there. You said that you shortened it to extend people on the call times when you worked in the call center. Was there other reasons as well? I'm sure that being in Australia, and I want to touch on your background in a minute, but was there reasons why that became easier for you? Because you introduced yourself to me as G. I've always known you as G. How has that come about over the years to just calling yourself G?
The first time that I decided to call my name is G, actually not in that call center, but that just came back again when I work in a call center. I used to work in a gym, right? Like we're talking about, a long time ago. And then that was in Indonesia. And there was one instructor that they sent from Australia. I can't remember the name. Then that instructor just like teaches how to do things. And then C had trouble with my name too. So I just like, okay, just call me G. But after that, it never just come back again until I worked back in a call center, right? But as far as the main reasons was just basically to make it simple for people to address me, to call me, and also to make it easy maybe for people to remember me, because I don't want people to say it to another person saying that, oh, that guy, what's his name? Like, when they learn and know my name, normally it sticks even better. But I think G just simplifies it for everyone.
I also wanted to touch on the name of your business as well and see where that came from, because that's not your business name. If you want to like enlighten everyone to that, but then that's not your own name either. Where did that come from, and what was and how long have you had that as your business name?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mike. You're actually the first person asking me about this. When we come up with the business name, we as creatives, we always like tossing up, should it be my name? Should it be something else, right? I never thought of my name back then. Plus, Gunawan, the name Gunawan in Indonesia, that is a very common name. That is like Singh for Indians. It's like Smith, for Western names. So that's why I was like, this is not unique enough, right? That's one of the reasons why I didn't use my name. Obviously, in Australia, it's different. Now I'm tossing if I should use my name, but I'm still keeping it that way. Red Imagination Photography, that came up from because I love the color red. And then back then, I actually labeled 2005 when I started doing it professionally. I labeled my business as Red Devil Photography. And I've got stickers and everything. But that doesn't come across well as wedding photography brand, and you think, Red Devil. So after a couple of years, like 2007, then I decided, okay, this needs to change to something more, not too quirky, put it that way. So, and imagination comes in mind, because I always believe that imagination is where the masterpiece starts. When you're talking about airplanes that we, commute on these days, how did it start, right? Imaginations. All of those beautiful artworks that like Starry Nights, Van Gogh, and all that, it's come from the imaginations, right? So I go, imagination. That's the red imagination. That's how it came about.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Like we have to have some type of creativity, some imagination to dream up these things that we create as artists. And there's definitely a lot that goes into it. And for you, first starting, you were saying you started your business back in 2005?
That's when I first shot my wedding, like paid wedding in Australia. Yeah.
And was that your first actual paid gig?
That's my first actual paid gig. Yeah.
Right. So you started by doing a wedding straight out the gate. You hadn't done any other sort of paid work before that?
Nah.
Wow. I feel like that's unusual to hear. Like, what was that experience like for you?
That was daunting, I'm not going to lie. I was shooting with one Nikon D70S, which is digital camera. And the other one is a film camera, Nikon F75. And trust me, man, you don't know fear until you shoot weddings with film cameras.
I do. You're not envy that situation at all.
So the reason why I took up that gig was I arrived in Australia, migrated in Australia 2005. That was it in May. And then for the first couple of months, 2-3 months, I couldn't find a job. And I remember I went to the interview one day and people even told me in the interview on the phone saying that, hey, your English is not good enough, mate, and then hang up. I was like, that's a wake-up call, right? So I went back and learned English a bit more. And then I tried to open up my network. And I said, I actually learned photography, bits and pieces. I take along my friends who do pre-weddings and weddings back in Indonesia. I was like, why don't I just find that gig? And then through family and friends, and we found this couple. The name is Roy and Gita, lovely couple. They're still friends with me until today, and we're still in touch. And that was in December, the 9th of December, 2005.
Yeah. I'm very sad to hear that you weren't able to get a job because people told you your English wasn't very good. I feel like most Aussies haven't got very good English, mate. Like they a lot of people can't hold a conversation very well. So for them to say that about you, I think is very sad, but also an opportunity as well.
I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that you saw that to then go, well, hey, where are my strengths and what do I do really well that I can just go out and do something by myself. I don't need any invitation. I don't need anyone to tell me that I'm good enough to do this. Let's just go and find the work that I'm really good at.
100%, man. I think when we experience something like that, right, at that moment, you're going to be like, oh, shit, that's rude. But if you take the right action and you respond appropriately, that can be a blessing in disguise. And it actually was.
Absolutely. You were saying that you came from overseas, you immigrated to Australia. Whereabouts did you come from and what was that journey like for you? I'm sure that was very daunting coming to Australia and then not having work. How was that whole transition?
It actually was. But the thing is, my mom's already here before me. That's the thing. That makes things easier in some ways, And my mom has lived in Australia from 1996. That's a long time ago. So I lived separately from my mom for a while. She's working, she's got sponsored and to live here and all that. And back in 1999, I came here just to study in Australia, right? That says a lot about my age now. And that didn't last long because back then I was meant to study the whole thing, probably 3 or 4 years, but I only lasted for 6 months. Couple of reasons, because I couldn't speak much English back then. I didn't have many friends. And then I had my music things happening in Indonesia. I was like, I just want to go back home and play music, man. My band's got interviewed in the radio without me. So I want to go back, Dude, I have no life here. shops closed at 5. I was like, 5 p.m. Everything's dark. What's going on here? So I decided to go back after 6 months. Mom stayed here working, and then I had my career path back then. It went pretty well, to be honest. I was pretty happy with that, with what I achieved back then. Working in a gym as sales, marketing, and all that. Met great people, but 2004 I hit that like the dead end, right? I was like, what else from here? Mom said, hey, I'm applying to be a permanent resident. Do you want me to include you? I was like, yeah, let's give it a shot again, you know. And at that time, my option was either going back to uni, because I've never been to uni. I've never gone to uni. So 2005, to advance my career in Indonesia, I need to go back to uni, or to Australia, right? Which is a whole new opportunities. And I'm glad I chose the latter.
That's a huge move for anyone, I think.
Big move, yeah.
Like to feel like you're going to, especially when you had something stable and had something that was working. Like you said, yes, you had sort of gotten to the end of where you could go, but you possibly could have gone and done other things in Indonesia, I'm sure. But to then move to Australia, that's a big jump. Had you had anything planned of what you were going to do when you moved?
No, there's no plan. I was just like, I think I'm done here with career-wise in Indonesia. Maybe this is the max that I can go. I'm just going to explore new opportunities, but nothing planned. I never even thought of being a photographer back then.
You said you were playing in a band back then. Let's open up about that. How long had you done that for?
I think when I moved to Australia, my band's playing for like 3 years, maybe. It's not that long. But we recorded some songs, and that's being played in the radio, in a, like a local TV. They use our song, that sort of stuff. That's how we got into interviews in the radio.
And is that something that you still do to this day, or is that just something that you were interested in back then?
No, I still love music, man. I still love music. I just don't have much time, and it's not the priority anymore. But I don't think, if you're already hooked up with music instrument, I don't think you can get out of it.
For so many of us artists, feeling like we have to turn our art into a business, I think is huge. And for most like people that do like music, I think a lot of them just do it out of the genuine love. And I think there's a lot we can learn from a lot of musicians, that they just, as you said, that once you get into it, you can't let go of it. It is a part of you forever. I feel a bit like that with when I'm doing photography as well. Like it's just part of who I am. Like I love taking photos, regardless of whether I was being paid for it or not. And so I like to lean into that and think, well, how do other creative people do it? Like how do they just find the time and inspiration just to play and just do creative things without the need to feel like they have to be more than themselves?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's the same with any art forms that you love, right? If the journey goes and then you maybe at one point you go, oh, I think I'm done with photography. You try to do something else. I'm pretty sure 100% you're going to be drawn back to photography. You're going to be like, I miss that.
I think drawn back to creativity in general, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
as creative people, we have that in us to create stuff. And if it's not photography, it'll be something else. And don't feel afraid to try new things, because you can often find a lot of transferable skills or a lot of other things in another medium that you may not have found before.
100%, yeah. Try some new things, Just be brave, put yourself out there.
Absolutely, and it doesn't have to be everything. Like you don't have to turn it into something. It can just be something that could spark inspiration in your other careers, further on down the track.
I do think that correlates as well, one to another. As long as you keep on learning the things that sparks you, that's going to take you somewhere.
And what was the spark for you then with photography? Where did that come about? How did you start? Well,
to be honest, first of all, because it was hard to find a job. That's one. And then, and I just love, I always have curiosity about photography in general anyway. When I was 15 or 16 years old, around that, I had the photo of Jean-Claude Van Damme in my room. Yeah.
Of course you did, yeah.
And what's interesting about that photography is it's got like very big shadows on one side and like big highlights on the other side, right? And then back then I had point and shoot camera, film camera, point and shoot, which no matter how hard I tried, I could not reproduce something like that. So I left that for a little while, but when I started learning photography again, I was like, this is how you do it. Oh, there's this exposure triangle that you gotta understand. Yeah. So what sparks me, first of all, that was because of, I gotta find a job. But as the time goes, then that's actually serving my bigger purpose, which is making this world a better place. I draw attention by creating pictures, whether that's something that's beautiful to the people that see it, or maybe something that's meaningful. Could be something very emotional, very meaningful, like wedding photos. Could be something as beautiful as astrophotography. And when I get that attention, at least I can draw them into different mindset. I know it sounds manipulative, but I can just put captions that in any way that helps us to be, to be a better person, I guess.
It definitely feels like you're coming from a very genuine place of really caring about people. Is there something that you could turn to within life that has led you to have that perspective?
Yeah, so I grew up in Indonesia, right? I was very unfortunate as far as the financial goes. So there was like less fortunate situations the way I've been brought up. But that's really great because that put things into perspective in many ways. That felt really difficult back then, not being able to afford food on the table. Mom's working very hard. I started working when I was 14 years old as a paper boy. And then I remember, I always get emotional when I think about this, man. I remember one night, we hardly have any food to eat. There's only like sort of like one portion enough for one people or two people. I had my brother as well living with me at that time, like me, my brother, and my mom living in the probably like 4x6 square meters place that we rented, and the bathroom at the back, and then sleeping area, lounge, the kitchen, even everything just like in that small area. So we slept on the floor. There's no mattress or anything. I was about 14 years old, between 14 and 15 years old back then. And I remember my mom let me eat the food, saying that, yeah, I'm okay. But as we were sleeping out at night, I clearly heard my mom's stomach rumbling. So
that's a very hard position to be in, G. How does that make you feel when you talk about that today and where you are in your life now?
Oh man, always emotional. I'm emotional right now, but in many ways, I'm so glad all of those happened because it put things into perspective in a way that I know how it feels like to be helpless, to be not getting any help. That's why when I see people being oppressed, right? Like a lot of people talk about gay and lesbian communities, like things that are happening in the world these days, Gaza. I do feel them because that's not how humans should live, to my opinion. And if we can help, then help as much as we can, right? I do this a lot of times. I'm in like a very bloody fortunate situation right now. I'm so blessed. I've got everything that I dreamt of today, from the family, from financially, the freedom, huge, man. I'm living my dream. Whenever I can, and I'm not saying it to brag or anything, right? But if anyone needs help, someone happened to be like on the street, broken down car, for example, in the middle of nowhere, I'm okay to come at them and say, hey man, how you going? Do you need help? even though I'm not a mechanic. And one of the occasions that I was driving home from Victoria one day after a camping trip, on the way to Albury, I saw a family car broken down in the middle of the road, in the middle of nowhere, with 3 kids in there. I was like, I'm not a mechanic, but let me see if I can help. And I just pull over and ask. And then nothing that I can do with the car, but they asked me if I can actually drop the missus and the kids off in Albury, which is a bit of a detour for me, but I'm fine to do that because I know what it feels like if no one's actually come to help them. Like that's just one small example. I'm just like going sidetrack here, but
Where does that like helping spirit come from? Did that come from like your mum?
I would say so. I would say it's mom's definitely one of them. But just like the upbringing, being bullied at schools, because I was the minority. I've got Chinese descendants, right, living in Indonesia, and I went to school that are not many Chinese. Probably it's only me and my brother. Like they call us Chinese back then, and I got bullied a lot, right? A lot of people that with Chinese descendants, they more fortunate financially, so they go to different school, like private schools and all that, but not me. I think because of that shaped me to be who I am now.
You're someone who, to me, comes across as an optimist in the world. You always see the best in people, and I think that's beautiful when, I've had conversations with you before and you've always just shown so much joy and so much love to everyone around you. And you've always like stood up for what you believe in, and I think that comes through in your art as well. Like what you want to put out in the world, you're very true on making sure that you're very true to yourself when it comes to your art.
Thanks, man. I think optimism comes from understanding what's the downside, right? You can't say that you are, a brave person if you never come across a lion before. Like that's just like hypothetical, but yeah. I think you appreciate things more when you experience or already experience the downside of what not having that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I'm forever grateful for what I was able to start. I think my story, I don't want to ever compare to what you've been through, but for me, first starting my business, the reason I started was because I wanted to work for myself and not because I'd been trying to get jobs and had been turned down. I wanted to do something for myself and not feel like I had to prove something to anyone else, in an interview or something like that, but could just be me and could start something. And I'm always very proud that I've come through and done that, because like for so many people, they aren't able to experience that and aren't able to have the opportunity to do that. I always tell people, just go out there and try something. What's the worst that can happen? And when you've been through, when you've been through what you've been through, the worst is, so far beyond what someone could be experiencing by starting like photography for the first time and thinking that, it may not work out in a year. Well, what's the worst that's really happened to you?
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
For anyone who's out there who may be saying, look, I'm in a very privileged position. I don't know what it feels like to not have those opportunities. What advice could you give to someone to maybe step back, to maybe come face to face with the dragon in a way, to say that now you know what it's like to be scared? How do you feel like someone could put themselves into that position of being less fortunate?
I would say I love these Spider-Man quotes. You know where this is going. With great power comes great responsibilities. A lot of people may be not aware that they've how much of a power that they have, but most of us have that. And if they still not realize that, I would say go travel to places where they don't provide you comfort, right? If you go to Bali, maybe avoid 5-star hotels. Go to the places hundreds of kilometers away from the main town. Just travel. That's going to change you. Just like anything and everything, we don't know what we don't know, right? and seeing things that we've never seen before, we never thought of before, the culture that's totally different. That teaches us not to be very judgmental, because what we know is true or right. That's just what we think is right. We live in our own bubbles. Everyone lives in their own bubbles, right? So to see what's happening on the other side of the bubbles or outside the bubble, just travel and see places that are different.
I do think we are blessed to be exposed to so much today and be able to do so many things and speak to so many different people from so many different backgrounds. I think it is definitely a bit of a curse as well, having all this information right at your disposal every single day. But being able to go out and experience things does bring you newer perspectives on the world of things that you may have sort of taken for granted or may not have seen as really big. To other people, these could be huge. And so thinking about that when you're creating art as well is important, because something that may not be a huge, amazing artwork to you could be the best thing that someone else has ever sort of come across. And everything is so subjective, and it does sort of teach you that when you are creating art.
Yes. Which then come back to the topic that I really love talking about as well, is like, because everything's subjective, then there's always a bunch of people that like you, that will resonate with you. So just show up.
Exactly. And I know that you posted something a couple of weeks ago about how it's selfish to not really put yourself out there and to not be yourself. And I really resonate with that, because for me, if I'm not my truest version of myself, I then lose the ability to help someone who may be inspired by the work that I do. It's the same with that piece of art that you may have created that could really help someone, but you're holding it back because you may not think it's 100% perfect.
Yes, that's right. And in saying that, thank you so much for encouraging me to come to this podcast as well, Mike, because when I said, hey, I got broken English, and this is another reason that you should come to this podcast. And that really sparks things in me when I saw you, said that. Because if I can help one person from this podcast, right, whether that change their perspective to the better or do something to the better, that's a win.
Absolutely. I always go in with that sort of headspace or that sort of mindset of saying, like, if this can help one person, that's great for me. Like, that's, in my books, that's huge, because I think about when I was first starting and maybe not having someone to look up to, or not someone who was like me, or someone who was introverted, or someone who wasn't able to speak well and is putting themselves out there, to think about that. If I can inspire that one person, then that's always the bar for me. Like, I've got to throw it out no matter what some people may say about it. It's helping that small group of people, and you will find your people by just being yourself and putting yourself out there continually.
100%. And people that is sort of very judgmental to you, they're probably hurting themselves inside anyway, right? And it's for your opportunities not to say screw you to that person, but is to show up and hopefully to inspire that person and change their mindset, so that eventually they're coming along with you.
It's a very, very wise perspective there, G, of saying, like, not sort of taking it to heart, but understanding why they have those things to say and how you could potentially help them as well understand about their own work, because often it is a reflection of what they think of themselves. So how can we help bring them on side? Be like, I've been there before too. Like, trust me, I've been in positions where I have not enjoyed my work at all and have hated everything that I do, and I really hated the world. So how can I bring them on side and say, look, it doesn't have to be that way?
Yeah. I think we have to experience that, we have to experience all those downsides as creatives.
You're someone who definitely stands on what you believe with your own work and your own brand and just you as a person. I think a lot of people, and I hear this from so many different people, not wanting to sort of blend their personal life into their business. And it's hard because a lot of us are creating personal brands online. How do you think about sharing views on things online? Because for a lot of people, they just want to remove their whole from their online business. They're working as a photographer. They want to just remove that because they don't want to turn people away by being too much themselves or giving out opinions that may be against what their clients believe potentially. How do you think about that in terms of your business?
That's a really good question. I had a bit of a battle in my mind about that as well. Before I come about and just decide I just gonna go all out and just be myself. Couple of things with social media these days, how everything goes. You will always find your tribe, right? So, and I'd rather just to be myself all the way through instead of just, if you want to say, faking it or just covering things up that's eventually going to come out and then brings everything into rubble, right? I'd rather find my tribe from the very beginning. Plus, with everything that I shared and everything that I stand on, I'm not really judging people and just like, you bad, screw you. Or it's not like that. The value that really resonated for me is like humanity anyway. That's our common ground, right? I really truly want these like our communities to be a better place.
Everything you share comes out of love, and the way that you present things is very much out of love for just everyone. How do you think that that's impacted, as you said, your tribe and your group of people that you have online?
I'm sure some people it's not going to resonate with me, and that's totally fine. I lose followers every time I talk about two things. About my stance for the oppressed people in the world, like Gaza, Sudan, and all that. And when I talk about, when I share things about gay weddings. But I'm not backing off because I believe that every human's equal, right? If we have different perspective, that's totally fine. We can have a chat, but what I stand for here is the humanity side of it. And by doing that as well, I will attract people that resonate with me, the businesses that resonate with me, and that's going to bring me to businesses that I probably even more enjoy to work with, right? Because I'm here for the long run. I'm sure you're here for the long run, and we all have to think for the long run too, right? So everything, all the moves that we do, everything that we do, that's why we need to be like very honest to ourselves, because you can only stay so long for not being yourself.
I feel like when I look at your photography, it's just, you've done so much. Like we were talking about astrophotography before, like that's so far removed from like wedding photography. But then you've done a lot of travel as well. You've done a lot of travel photography. Where has all that come from? Where do these ideas spark themselves?
I don't know. Hey, I always, like everyone, I always enjoy travel, right? And I love photography, and they really go hand in hand. I think wedding photography is the way what I love about weddings is it is a job, yes, but I get to capture memories that they're gonna keep for. That's gonna be like, man, in the next 10 years, some people on the photos might not be here with us anymore, and it's gonna be big things for the couple to keep. No matter whether that's 2 megapixels or 25 megapixels, that doesn't matter. Yeah. But I love to do like different things, and I love to, because even though I'm doing photography, some clients ask me to do video because they like my video. I was like, I'm not gonna branding myself. I mean, I was thinking that I shouldn't be branding myself as a videographer, but at the end, I was like, I actually enjoy this as well, but a lot of work. But I still do that if I resonate with the clients. If that's a client that I really enjoy working with, why not? But as far as branding myself, I would say I'm a wedding photographer as well as astro photographer.
How has that transition gone over the years for you? You've been in the industry for quite a while then, having shot your first wedding like in 2005. Like that's a lot of time to be working at it. Have you noticed things changing in your own personal style in the industry over those years?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I think you probably experience the same here, Mike. Like, I think change is definitely constant. There are things that I really like, the style that I really like back then, I don't really like now. That's why the portfolios on my website, I really shortlist them to only the portfolios that resonate with me and the clients that I want to attract. But it's not to say that my style was bad and my style now is good, I'm going to keep it forever. I don't think that's a wise way of thinking about our evolution as an artist. I think we still have to keep that open, because inevitably change is gonna happen again. Yeah, just let it flow.
The only true constant is change, and if you're not keeping up, you are going to get left behind. And sometimes your style will change, and you have to, as you said before, you have to go with what you enjoy. And if you're not enjoying your style at the moment, it's going to be very hard to stick with that long term. So change it up, try something new, and your clients will come along for the ride. Often it's like a client doesn't know what they want, so you've got to be the one to go out on the front foot and sort of show them what's good, or show them how you can create an image, to then for them to say, well, I love those images in your portfolio now, I want to work with you because of those. So sometimes it is about you having to get ahead of what the trends are, because you just really like to do something a particular way.
I think that's our job as professionals. A lot of times our clients don't aware of many things, right? We get exposed a lot more than our clients, and that's our job to make them aware that what are the things that are possible and it can be benefit to them.
And I think that this comes back to why I don't like speaking super much about gear and equipment in photography. And because I don't think that is what is super important in the art. I think we can get too far in the weeds and get too technical about what is a great image, but that's only a great image to us. When you work with clients, what's a good image to them is not a good image to you. And so depending on who's in the image will be a very nice image to the other person, depending on how it's framed, how they were acting in the photo when you're working with clients. Portrays a different thing in their head. How they remembered that image on the day as well, what was happening at the time, actually speaks a lot to how they remember the image, to them, how much they enjoy the image, or if they're going to have it sort of printed out and hung on the wall. It doesn't matter if it's the best framed or the best composed, a lit image you've ever taken. It doesn't matter to the client, because at the end of the day, they remember it in a bad way. They're not going to enjoy the image. So there's so much more that goes into that. And as you said, making them comfortable and working with clients and showing them what works well.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to care about the edge-to-edge sharpness. Yeah. So the essence in photography, as much as I love my gears, not in the gears.
I love the gear for what it allows me to do. And I think for me, yes, the enhancements in gear you were talking about before, shooting your first wedding on a film camera, that idea to me scares me. So I'm glad that the gears evolved, right? Because to me, that would have been horrible. How many years did you do that for?
I think that was probably my own. Hold on. No, that was my only weddings with film.
Is there a reason for that?
Because I couldn't afford the digital camera, and I bought the D70S for that wedding, and it cost me nearly $2,000 back then. I think 1990 or something. Yeah, it was expensive, man.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I can imagine the stress. You would have been like, no, I've got to upgrade from this. I can't be using this.
Yes, but luckily I've shot with films in an event before, like a birthday party, back in Indonesia. But it's nothing as crazy as wedding, So got a hang of it. But digital helps a lot.
How was the experience? I want to ask for you when you started working with Nikon Australia. You've been using their gear for a long time. You talked about that was one of your first cameras. How was that experience when they get in touch with you and ask you to work for them?
How did you feel, Mike?
I asked you first.
Okay. Well, how it played out was during COVID time. So everyone's at home, creating at home. And I posted a Lego photo that I reenact, so it looks like it's actually in Antelope Canyon. And I got inspired by this girl. I got to give her a credit. I think the Instagram is Erin Outdoors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Erin Outdoors, if you're listening.
Yeah.
You shout out.
Yes. So she posted all these miniature photos. I was like, this is really cool, right? So I got the brown paper bag, and I've got some sand that I collected on the roads when I was traveling, like a brown sensor. I just like spread everything on this little table, like probably 50 by 50 centimeters platform, and with the Lego toy on it. So it makes it look like an Antelope Canyon. And then that photos got attention from someone. Someone messaged me saying that, hey, G, what gear do you use? And I got these questions a lot, right? So I was like, I'm using Nikon Z6 and Nikon D750 at the time. And she asked me about something else after that. So I was like, oh, this person's probably want to have a chat about gears, photography recommendation, things like that. So I responded. And then after a couple of chat lines, she goes, I'm actually from Nikon Australia. And I was like, it's gotta be a scam. And then she said, if there's a time, then maybe we can have a chat on the phone. I was like, it's scary, it's not coming from Nikon, it's coming from individual account and want to get me on the phone. But I was like, the worst things can happen. What can it happen? Right? Maybe my details got stolen. Are they going to hack into my phone? Like all those things, crazy things playing in my mind. But I was like, I'm going to give it a shot anyway. If it's Nikon, it's a big win. And I had a chat, and yeah, it happened to be Nikon Australia. And it started with, they want to loan me some gears to try out, to unbox. And that was Nikon Z5 back then. And it just got released, and it's not even in the market yet. So I was like, ooh, fancy. Right? So I tried it out and made a vlog out of it, and then put my reviews out there, and it went well. And then they came back to me again saying that they want me to be on the YouTube channel. And that was so awkward, man. And everyone said, I want to go back and watch that video. That was so awkward because that's my first time working with a brand that I really love. Right, the brands that I've been wishing since I was in Indonesia. I wish I can work with Nikon, and it happened at that moment. I was like, how should I react? How should I act? Should I be myself? Should I be like just like sit back and listen and just being reactive? I think that's basically what I end up doing. Just like, oh yes, oh yeah, just responding to questions. And after that, Sarah, Sarah from Nikon. Yeah, and she sent me another email saying that, hey, we want to make it official, for you to come on board as a Nikon creators. That was in, I think, end of 2020. I was stoked, man. I was stoked. Yeah, and then just start rolling from there.
That's great. I think that speaks to you as a person, that you gave that random person who reached out to you by DM, you just gave them first and foremost, you answered their questions, which a lot of people would probably just ignore those messages. And then second of all, you jumped on a call with a stranger who just happened to say that they were from the brand. But that really worked for you. Like other people would not do that, and they wouldn't give that person the time of day. And for you, that sort of paid off.
Yeah, exactly. So for those who's listening out there, if people asking you about gears, asking you about your expertise, answer them. You won't be able to get like 2 million fans if you don't even take care of the first 5 fans that you have.
That's very true. It's very true. And the gear, again, some people think it's like handing away or your secrets about how you do things. And I'm like, look, if you can go and emulate the work that I've done, great. Like that's totally fine. Like me giving you what gear I used or how I took the photo even is not going to allow you to go out and take that photo. Like that may be a good place to start for you, but you're going to have to do a lot of work to get to a point. And if I can help, that's great. But they're not going to steal your work. They're not going to steal your clients. And if anything, it just pays off, because when you provide value, and I've been huge on that, providing as much value as you possibly can, it does come back. And I think that's a really testament to you about that someone, just saw one of your images. And I'm sure that was not the first image that you ever posted. Like you've been working for a lot of years, like sharing work, and they'd probably sort of seen other of your stuff before. Then they reach out and say, hey, we'd really love to work with you.
Yeah, very likely. I don't think Nikon, like a brand like Nikon, would just like randomly pick someone that you just see the first time. I doubt that. And the fact that they got me onto the YouTube channel was, I'm pretty sure, because they already seen me on YouTube back then. So again, for those who's watching, just keep doing what you love, keep sharing, and keep showing up. When you're working with that big brand like that, right? That gives you that credibility, so you can just like say, hey, I'm working with Nikon, and that boosts the credibility and trust for the clients that you want to work with, right? The opportunities that open up, workshop is a big one, because 2021, I think in June, Nikon said, "Hey, G, do you want to host a workshop in Sydney Harbour?" I've never done a workshop before. And they got me 15 attendees. One person, 15 attendees, first workshop ever. I was nervous. And at that time, I text Chungi, Hisu, right? Back then, we're not friends yet. We just like basically, I just admire his work through Instagram, and every great photographer, awesome Chungi photos. Check him out. And every time I text him and ask about something, the location, Blue Mountains, he always answered. Right? Never met him in person, never. But he's always very helpful. And I've seen him running a workshop for Nikon before me, right? So I text him just asking for tips and suggestions, because I was like freaking my ass. Then, and one thing that he said that really calmed me down is just make sure you give value to the attendees, check out on them often. So I was like, oh yes, that's what I need to do. It's not about me. It's not about how they think I look or how I talk, how I run a class, but it's just about how much they can gain, right? And based on that, then I just like put down all this on a script about bullet points, what I need to deliver. Because that's my first workshop, man. I'll get nervous. And everything went well. Hisu helped me on the day. That's the first time we met. And there's another guy as well to help me with the gears. So yeah, as far as opportunities from Nikon, that's the biggest one that opened up for me.
And you now run your own workshops as well, which is something that's super exciting. Is that something that started from that?
It started from that, yeah. Because that's proof of concept and trust about what people trust me to do and what I can do.
And how was the transition then into like hosting your own workshops?
Because I always love Astro, right? And if there's any workshop that I want to host, I was thinking there's a lot of people teaching photography out there in a workshop. I'm probably not gonna do the same thing. And I feel like there's opportunities in Astro, because with mirrorless cameras, even though you can see what you get, but with Astro, you can't see what you about to shoot. Astro and flash photography. Yes. Yeah. There's no simulation to that yet. So that's why I just like dive into Astro. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do this.
And how many classes have you done up to this point?
Probably like 8.
I've actually been to one of your astrophotography workshops, so I'll have that out there. It was great. I'm not a very good astrophotographer myself, but I definitely learned a lot. But it was inspiring to see you actually run a class, because for me, I'm always like, it'd be lovely to put myself out there and go do that. Like, I've hosted workshops with other people before, but to do one by myself is kind of scary. What have been some of the biggest learnings for you in really putting yourself out there and hosting classes and educating other people?
I think the good thing about Nikon running the classes and set up and running the classes for me, I don't have to worry about the logistics, the behind the scenes of how that's being planned and then advertised, and then any changes to the workshop if there need to be any changes. So running that myself, especially astrophotography, that's so weather dependent. So it's the biggest learning is I probably need to come up with a better system when the workshop probably needs to be postponed because of the weather. So I don't have to manually text them one by one. Just get the automation in a way. That's the next thing I need to figure out. And overall, I just want to make sure that the experience also being maintained.
How do you feel about the types of people that come to these workshops? Because I think for me, the biggest hurdle is, maybe I don't know enough to educate, or maybe if I was on the spot at a class and got asked a particular question, I wouldn't have an answer to it. And I think that that's a hurdle for a lot of people, educating first and foremost, but then in person as well. How has that been? And have you been surprised by how you've gone with that?
I think that's probably the fear of most people. That's the fear of me as well back then. Because you got to face it. You got to accept that there'll be people that know better than you, right? Even if they're attending your workshop and want to learn something from you. And you just have to open with the possibility of people asking the things that you don't know. And my approach to that is just being very honest, you know. So I just set expectation in my workshop saying that this is what's going to be covered, which is what I know and what I know well. And then, so that sort of set them and weed out the people that, oh, this is not for me, this is too easy, I already know that, then it's weed them out. But even though they're coming and ask you the questions that you don't have the answer for, just be honest and say that you don't know. You haven't been exposed to that. But you're gonna do the research and then you're gonna come back to them, right? That might or might not be the answers that they want at the end. But I think that is important. Plus, that's actually learning for you.
I think one of my biggest learnings by educating online, but also in person, is that you are always an expert in some area to another person. Like, you will always know more than some other person in a particular area. You may not be the best at any particular type of art, but you will always know someone more than someone else, so then you can then educate that person on that thing. And for me, I was always scared about, or maybe I don't know enough to start, or maybe I don't know enough to talk in person. But the types of people that you attract are people who are inherently where you were a few years ago. And so they don't have the questions that you don't know the answer to. They just have the questions that you do. And you can help so much. And if they do ask a question that you don't know, maybe you can't help them with that, but I'm sure you can help them in 10 other ways. And so don't get hung up on the one thing that you couldn't do. Just remember how much you are able to provide and how much help that possibly would have been. Like, if you put yourself in that same position, how much help would that have been to you when you first started? I'm sure that would have been huge.
Yeah, that's spot on, mate. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you also, doing your own workshops and everything. It's very beneficial for a lot of people.
Well, we are actually running a workshop together next year, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
On the whole wedding photography, which is going to be fun.
Yep. Looking forward to
that. Yeah, that's going to be a big step. Have you ever done that type of educating in that space before?
No, but every year Nikon asks all the creators about what workshop that you want to do, any ideas and suggestions. And I've been always suggesting weddings and astro. Yeah. But I haven't come up with the astro. That's one of the reasons why I came up with my own. But weddings eventually coming about. So never done it before. We're going to have a chat more about that. That's going to be interesting.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great workshop.
Yeah. And I'm learning from you next week. Like, yeah.
You are learning from me, which is interesting. I think, I put myself in that position of, you've been in this industry for so long. I haven't been in for nearly as long as you have. But I think we definitely come with a different perspective. Exactly. Like, we all have a different way of learning. I've done different things than you've done, and I learn a lot from you. You probably learn a lot from me. And if you can go in with that approach, like you said at the beginning, just go in with an open mind about how much you can learn, but help other people as well. And I think that always comes out to your benefit.
Yeah. I think as educators ourselves as well, when we come to learn from other creators, educators, my mindset personally is I come with open mind and then with the approach of I don't know what I don't know. Because going by my experience, there's always something that I can learn from each session that I've been to.
Yeah. Is there anywhere, any people, any places, any online spaces, in-person workshops that you've done before that have been really helpful for you over the course of your years?
I've done this James Day. Do you know James Day, the wedding photographer from Wollongong? He's great, I joined his workshop. That's pretty helpful. Yeah. And there's other workshops as well. I joined the Astrophotography workshop by Jay Did Photos in the Palm Beach. I learned something from that too.
It's great to hear that, you actively take steps to improve, because a lot of people get to that point where they're like, I couldn't learn from someone else because, I've got to be able to put myself out. I think it's an ego thing for a lot of people of saying, I've got to step back here and say there are things that I don't know. And if you're struggling, it's all right to ask for help.
Yeah, I think that's when you sort of like slow down with your learning and you stop
Mm,
growing.
absolutely. Yeah. What are the next things for you? What are the next dreams on the horizon, I guess, in places that you want to take your photography, workshops, any things that you would love to do with your creativity?
That's a great question, Mike. I really love astro and weddings, right? I really want to do these simultaneously, like the two, because weddings sort of die down in winter, right? So ideally, I'm probably going to do workshops, take the small group to more like an adventure photography workshops, not just the astro, maybe multi days, maybe 10 days, maybe 2 weeks to place like Indonesia, for example, because there's so much to explore out there. All right. I think in my dream right now, what I'm going to do is to do weddings when it's wedding seasons, when it's cold here, also astro season, which is really great. Then I'm going to take you out somewhere for a workshop.
Where would be your dream location to go for workshop? If you could host a workshop anywhere, where would it be?
I haven't traveled enough to understand which are the places that has like greater possibilities. But so far, I really like Indonesia around the Bromo area, West Java, and Patagonia. I really want to try explore that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great to be able to do a workshop like that. I'd love to be able to put something together like that. So I'll be definitely asking you about how that goes because that would be super interesting to plan.
But I've never been to Patagonia yet. I'm going to Bolivia next year. I'm very excited about that. So if that's going well, then I'll keep that possibility open.
Is there anything else, G, before we close out that you would like to give to the people? Inspiration, anything that you'd like to tell your younger self or someone out there who's thinking about first starting, or just, you know, anything that's helped you along your journey?
I would say gratitude. If you got health, you got wealth. And that's a good basis. Just be aware of there's so much that you can be grateful about. And then after that, you can just build your dreams based on that. Yeah. But always be grateful along the way because you have so much. You always have so much compared to a lot of people.
And I think you are the proof of that, G. And I think I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this episode and being so open and sharing what you've done, because I think for a lot of people that's going to be super inspiring, and we don't often hear people, speak about it in that way. And it's helpful to put things in perspective, as you said, but also to see that it does work, just to be so open and kind and caring, and that energy in the world does work, and it's done really great things for you, and now you're just trying to give back to other people, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you so much as well, Mike, for having me on this program. I'm grateful, giving a platform. Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, you're great, man. You're great. Keep up your good work.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. And I'll put all the links to all of your stuff down below. Any upcoming workshops, we'll definitely drop them in the description of this podcast, but also links to your website, Instagram, and places like that. YouTube as well. Maybe people can go back and find some of those older videos. That would be lovely.
I gotta go back to YouTube, man. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I'd love to get on there. Actually, that's an aspiration of mine. I think it's a hard place to crack.
Yeah, I think you definitely have a lot of potentials in YouTube, mate. You need to go on that.
Thanks, G. Appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, no worries, man. Yeah. You have a great day, yeah?
Well, that is the end of today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation half as much as I enjoyed having it. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you did leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below to let us know that you did enjoy this episode. Also, feel free to share this episode on Instagram and tag me at Mike Jeffrey Photography so I can reshare them on my stories. And also message me and let me know who you would love to hear on an upcoming episode of this podcast. I've always tried my best to be able to have conversations with people who are in the creative space and people that I think would be a good fit on this podcast. And I would love your input as well. In a very privileged position at the moment where, I'm able to reach out to people and have them on my podcast and have really interesting conversations with a whole range of people in the creative space and talk about their creative journey. So if there is anyone you would love to hear from, please let me know and I will do my best to try to get them on the podcast. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the first creatives of the land on which I am recording today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of so-called Australia. As we tell stories of today, I just want to reflect on how First Nations people here and across the globe have guided and informed our understanding of the creative journey. But until next week, friends, have a lovely week and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye. Editing and post-production on this episode was done by Mossy Media, and music was created by JWPATON.